In the heart of Cleveland, Ohio, the investigation into a chilling murder case turned cold within a mere 2 days. The solution seems as elusive as ever since the discovery of the body, remarked the detective, his frustration palpable. If anything, we may be even further away from it. A plea for help from the public inundated law enforcement with tips numbering in the thousands, received via phone calls, letters, and face-to-face encounters. Yet, as a journalist wrote, each lead seemed to mislead the police, leading them down hopeful paths that turned into mazes of exasperation. Now, 5 decades later, as the family and friends of Beverly Jarosz prepare to commemorate her life, investigators maintain their belief that her murder can still be unraveled. With cautious optimism, they approach the case armed with fresh perspectives and modern technology, considering it a calling to pursue justice. Without a doubt, there exists the possibility of solving this case, affirmed seasoned Assistant Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Paul Miles, an integral part of the cold case unit collaborating with the Garfield Heights police. We are taking the necessary steps to bring about that closure. Our pursuit hasn't wavered. Had Beverly lived, she would have turned 66. In a private anniversary mass at St. Therese, the church where her final resting place lies, her memory remains suspended at the age of 16. Beverly was a popular and attractive junior attending Marymount High School, formerly a Catholic girls' school that has since become co-ed Trinity High, located in Garfield Heights. She possessed a fondness for poetry, found solace in classical music and jazz, frequented the Cleveland Museum of Art, expressed aspirations of becoming a teacher, and selflessly volunteered as a typist at Marymount Hospital. The news of her murder dominated the headlines for months, leaving those closest to her unable to discuss the tragedy without difficulty. It occurred during the daylight hours, in the comfort of a post-war bungalow's snug bedroom, situated on a residential suburban street resembling countless others scattered throughout greater Cleveland. This was no crime of random opportunity, but an act of meticulously planned and targeted rage. The author and filmmaker dedicated to investigating the case even describe it as an assassination. The timing was nothing short of extraordinary, Miles disclosed. There existed a mere 90-second window. This murderer, you could say, was the luckiest, well, if you can call them that, individual on the planet. Just 90 seconds, and this tragedy would have been averted. A malevolent deed. The date was December 28, 1964, the day following the Cleveland Browns' final NFL championship, on a tranquil Monday following Christmas festivities. Beverly and her 12-year-old sister, Carol, occupied the same bedroom in their home on Thornton Avenue in Garfield Heights during their Christmas break. After having breakfast and bidding their parents, Ted and Eleanor, farewell as they left for work, the sisters embarked on a walk to visit their grandmother, Marie Vanek, residing a mile away up Turney Road, where they stayed for lunch. Subsequently, Beverly was driven home by the boy residing next door to their grandmother's house to meet her friend Barbara, a fellow classmate at Marymount. The girls had intended to pay a visit to another classmate, Margie. Arriving home just before 1 p.m., Beverly made a phone call to check in with her mother. She left a message for her father, purportedly from an individual who claimed they would call back, providing a name that later proved to be false. Shortly after, Grandma Vanek called, and Beverly hurriedly informed her that she had to go, Barbara was expected, and she needed to change her attire. Around 1:25, Barbara arrived at the house. To her surprise, the side door stood ajar, though the storm door remained locked. She rang the bell and knocked, hearing the faint sound of a radio playing loudly, followed by a sudden thud from upstairs, as if furniture were being moved. Perplexed, Barbara made her way to the front door, ringing the bell and knocking, patiently waiting for several minutes. Growing puzzled and unsure whether she was being stood up or teased, she eventually decided to head back home. It was at this moment that Margie called Barbara's house, inquiring about their whereabouts. Margie then contacted Grandma Vanek, who, in turn, reached out to Ted Jarosz, Beverly's father, at his workplace. Ted rushed home, arriving around 4 p.m. The blaring sound of the radio welcomed him from the driveway, propelling him to sprint into the house and up the stairs. The scene was soon swarmed by the police and a priest, enveloped in an eerie silence that would haunt Paul Miles during his initial visit to the house, nearly half a century later. "I've been to Auschwitz. That was always my benchmark for the most chilling place on earth," he shared. "At Auschwitz, you feel the presence of evil." Approaching the side door of the house, Miles was overcome by an overwhelming sense of malevolence. It was as if something sinister had transpired within those walls. Having witnessed countless crime scenes throughout his career, this was the first that unsettled him so profoundly. Garfield Heights Police Captain William Horrigan, who took charge of the investigation and tirelessly pursued leads until his passing, deemed it the most brutal killing he had ever encountered. For Cuyahoga County Coroner Samuel Gerber, who had worked on Cleveland's notorious torso murder cases in the 1930s, it stood as one of the most savage crimes I've witnessed in my 29 years as a coroner. Beverly, caught off guard while changing her clothes, had been subjected to a gruesome ordeal. Strangled with a rope and stabbed 42 times, her clothing had been violently torn away from her body, although no signs of sexual assault were present. While Gerber attributed the cause of death to strangulation, he emphasized that the knife wounds alone would have been sufficient to end her life. "The assailant arrived armed with 2 weapons," remarked documentary filmmaker Mark Wadestone. "Unless one is planning something, there's no reason to have 2. Somebody had been stalking her," Miles declared. The enigmatic stalker. During a recent interview at Carol's residence in Northeast Ohio, Beverly's mother, Eleanor, and sister, Carol, recounted instances of stalking. Present at the interview were Stone, author James Badal, and private investigator Floyd Conant. Both women vividly remembered receiving persistent hang-up calls, sometimes as many as 10 or 12 times a day, prior to the murder. They recalled the anonymous gift of a bracelet and a ring left on the back porch, bearing the inscription to Bev. Carol recounted an incident when their father came home one evening, spotted an individual staring up at the girl's bedroom from the lawn, and gave chase down the block, albeit without catching the intruder. Beverly grew increasingly cautious, always diligent about locking doors and drawing the blinds. She made a habit of checking in via phone whenever she went out. Additionally, she purchased a brass letter opener, keeping it close at hand for protection. "I still have it somewhere," Carol mentioned. "I couldn't think of a single person who could have done this to her," Eleanor expressed. "I couldn't assist the detectives in any way. I always believed it was a stalker." Eleanor revealed that since her daughter turned 16, she had a persistent premonition. Every time she laid eyes on Beverly, a sense of unease washed over her, as if something dreadful was bound to happen to her daughter's body. "It was the only premonition I ever had." Carol added that their grandmother may have shared the same foreboding. When Margie called to inquire about Beverly's whereabouts, Grandma uttered, "Oh my God, she's dead." Detectives concluded that Beverly must have been acquainted with her killer. She would not have left the door unlocked or allowed entry to a stranger. No signs of forced entry or struggle were evident on the ground floor. In the relentless pursuit of evidence, investigators combed through the entire neighborhood, meticulously searching from rooftops to sewers. To uncover the truth, they even drained a nearby skating pond. The investigation commenced with a swift round of interviews, targeting friends and acquaintances as the initial focal point. As time progressed, the number of interviews skyrocketed, surpassing 130 by the second day. And then, the investigation widened its scope. Seizing the opportunity to aid the cause, the Cleveland Press swiftly raised the stakes by offering a generous reward. Initially set at $5,000, it soon doubled to $10,000, a significant sum considering the average annual household income of $6,000 at the time. Miles, in recollection, stated, "Every disgruntled woman, whether she was upset with her husband or boyfriend, eagerly came forward with information." The influx of tips and leads became overwhelming. The banner headline of one day proclaimed, "Suspects arrest imminent," only to be followed by the report on the next day that all suspects questioned were cleared of any involvement. The mystery deepened. Among the sea of potential culprits, for young men attracted the heaviest scrutiny, the boyfriend, a conservative college student, the ex-boyfriend, categorized as a rebellious figure within teenage circles of that era, a college student neighbor known for his admiration of Beverly, and a young door-to-door salesman with a troubling history of assaulting women. However, since none of them faced charges, their names remain undisclosed. One individual vacillated between confessing and denying any role in the crime, yet the police dismissed the confession as unreliable. Fingerprinting and polygraph tests were administered to all the suspects. Alibis were presented. Horrigan, the lead investigator, honed in on a single suspect. In 1989, a staggering 25 years after the murder, he revealed, "I was convinced I had the killer within the first 2 days, but unfortunately, I lacked the substantial evidence needed for prosecution." Year after year, Horrigan maintained contact with the suspect, reaching out on the anniversary of the crime. Eventually, the tables turned, and the suspect initiated the calls, prompting ongoing speculation. In 2004, at the age of 93, Horrigan passed away. However, the flame of interest in the case continued to burn when Garfield Heights Police Chief Robert Sackett assumed responsibility nearly 15 years ago. Prior to Horrigan's knowledge fading away, Sackett consulted with him. A decade ago, Sackett and Detective Carl Bigacchio resolved to revisit the case, capitalizing on modern tools and techniques unavailable in 1964, most notably DNA testing. The advancements in technology fueled their persistence. "We currently have some items in the lab," Sackett shared. "While we have experienced disappointments in the past with DNA evidence, even a weak sample would be better than nothing at all." Sackett emphasized the belief that the perpetrator was someone acquainted with the victim, yet a prime suspect has yet to emerge. During the original investigation, the police focused their attention on a select few individuals. Astonishingly, those same names remain prominent today, with the individuals now in their 60s or 70s. Beverly Jarosz, now 88 and still vibrant with a clear gaze, harbors the lingering suspicion that crucial information was deliberately destroyed half a century ago to protect the killer. The burden of her daughter's murder weighed heavily on her shoulders, shared sparingly, if at all, with her husband. She recalled, "It was too painful to discuss with my husband. We never brought it up." The unspeakable tragedy remained an undercurrent in their lives. In the aftermath of the murder, the family sought solace at Eleanor's parents' home, while investigators, newspaper journalists, and television crews infiltrated their once peaceful abode. Relatives painstakingly scrubbed away the bloodstains from the floor before the family's return. A parish priest methodically blessed each room of the house, leaving behind a cherished medal that still adorns the entry door, symbolizing protection and faith. Eleanor, despite the tragic events, never experienced fear within the house. However, her daughter Carol, particularly during the nighttime, couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling. Eventually, she mustered the courage to return to her old room, but it always troubled her. During her freshman year of high school, Carol entered Marymount Convent as an aspirant in the Sisters of St. Joseph of the Third Order of St. Francis. She resided there for 2 years, contemplating the possibility of becoming a nun. Reflecting on those times, she remarked, "I think every Catholic girl considered it back then, but she believes her inclination was influenced by the murder." "I felt relieved when she went to the convent," Eleanor shared. "I believed she would be safe there." Such was the level of concern that Carol revealed, "I was never left alone after the incident until the day I got married." Now a grandmother with 4 accomplished professional children, she rarely divulges her harrowing past. Following the divorce, Ted Jarosz, who passed away in 2012, lived alone in the family home for nearly 3 decades. He left everything untouched, exactly as it was in 1964, even keeping the radio in the living room intact, hoping that one day a jury might need to visit the premises. Unfortunately, Ted, along with others involved in the case, endured harassment from cranks, busybodies, armchair detectives, and later, online commentators. They faced derogatory remarks, baseless accusations, insinuations, and even threats. Aside from Beverly, there are many other victims in this tragedy, Miles solemnly acknowledged. Barbara, Beverly's friend, who preferred to keep her last name anonymous, became a target as well, enduring considerable hardships. Carol expressed, "Barbara really bears the brunt of it." The harassment extended to a boy who gave Barbara a ride, the boy who drove Beverly home, and other neighbors and friends. In the aftermath of the murder, a separate suicide case involving a Garfield Heights teenager, which would typically remain a private matter, received front-page coverage. Lost hope and haunting dreams plagued the affected individuals, leaving lasting scars on their lives. Author James Badal, renowned for his relentless research and utilization of modern forensic techniques in solving Cleveland's notorious torso murders, delved into the case in his books, In the Wake of the Butcher, Though Murder Has No Tongue, and Hell's Wasteland, which explored similar killings in Pennsylvania. He also chronicled another unsolved crime in Cleveland in his work, Twilight of Innocence, The Disappearance of Beverly Potts. Driven by a sense of purpose, Badal recently embarked on investigating and writing a book about the Jarosz murder. His journey began when a family friend inquired if he would be interested in taking up the case, an opportunity he eagerly seized. Collaborating with Stone, his partner in true crime documentaries aired on public television and released on DVD, and investigator Floyd Conant, a seasoned security consultant and former state trooper, Badal formed a dedicated team. Through extensive research, Badal has become a comprehensive authority on the case. The trio has reenacted the crime, a valuable exercise in eliminating suspects, and worked closely with official investigators to re-examine evidence and uncover overlooked or concealed details. A related enigma also caught Badal's attention. 7 years after the murder, while Ted and Eleanor attended a neighbor's funeral, their home was burglarized. Strangely, the sole item taken was a gold watch. However, the intruder had torn the backings from 2 prints that adorned the wall, an homage to Beverly's favorite 18th-century English portraits, Thomas Gainsborough's The Blue Boy and Thomas Lawrence's Pinky, which her father had lovingly framed for her. "It seemed as though someone was searching for something," Badal remarked, intrigued by the peculiar incident. Conant, who grew up in close proximity to the Jarosz residence and attended the same parish, recalls being questioned by the police as a teenager while walking home in the aftermath of the crime. His father happened to be one of Chief Sackett's teachers at Garfield Heights High School. Sackett, who was only 6 years old at the time of the murder, lived approximately a mile away. Miles, too, possesses personal connections to the case. "I'm of Polish descent from Garfield Heights. My mother went to school with Ted Jarosz," he shared. Having meticulously studied over 700 police reports related to the case, Miles shakes his head in disbelief at the opportune timing that allowed the killer to arrive and depart without being detected. "There's something more significant," he asserted. "I firmly believe that a specific event occurred on the 27th of December that will undoubtedly impact the investigation of the 28th. There's a definite possibility of solving it. We're actively engaged in proactive measures to crack the case." He refrains from divulging specific details, as he possesses knowledge that only the killer and himself are privy to, and he is resolute in safeguarding that information. "It's valuable," he affirmed. Eleanor Jarosz, however, harbors little hope that her daughter's murder will ever be resolved. "Throughout these 50 years," she added wistfully, "I've only dreamt about Beverly once. But I think of her every single day." On the other hand, Carol frequently dreams about her sister, although not extensively. She described her dreams as follows: "It's always the same, I find her, and then I lose her amidst the crowd." Recounting her most recent dream, she shared its peculiar nature. "We were at my childhood home, washing the car. Beverly appeared as a 16-year-old. I noticed a threatening man approaching her. I looked at her, then glanced at my grandson, and said, 'I have to make a choice. Whom should I go to?' I opted for my grandson and picked him up. And then, someone took her away." Carol expressed the recurring theme of finding and subsequently losing her sister. "She's always gone," she lamented. Anyone who might know anything about the Beverly Jarosz murder can call the Garfield Heights Police Department at 216-475-3056. If you found this video informative and thought-provoking, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. By doing so, you play an invaluable role in keeping this investigation alive and increasing the chances of reaching those who might hold the missing pieces of this puzzling crime.